The keychain sat in the center of the table, bright and wrong. She stepped past it, eyes sliding away. "Must be yours," she said, light voice, wrist already turning a glass. The charm caught the sun and threw it back like a signal. I picked it up. Plastic, smooth, still factory clean. A small wave stamped into the charm, too cheerful for our house. It was new. "Where did this come from?" I kept my voice flat and low. She set the glass down, the rim clicking once. Her gaze stayed on the waterline as if it might spill. She watched the sink. The unpaid bill lay half under the key bowl. Bold red across the top, past due. The envelope's edge curled, a small surrender. I pulled it free and laid it flat. She reached without looking and tugged the grocery flyer over it. Fingernails careful, each move tidy. The red strip still showed. The table wore it like a warning. I turned the charm in my hand. No scratches. No history. A tiny code on the back, a store's logo, something coastal. We didn't collect things like this. She brushed a crumb off the counter that wasn't there. "You always bring home stuff," she said, tone thin, feet planted. She didn't cross the room. Her shoulders angled toward the door. I set the keychain down with a soft clack. The noise made her blink. Her hand paused midair, then changed course and reached for a towel. No one claimed the noise. "It's not mine," I said, checking the bowl of keys, the drawer, our hooks by the door. Nothing matched. The charm looked loud against our iron ring. It didn't fit the row. She poured more water into the same glass and didn't drink. Phone face down beside her, black screen reflecting nothing. Her thumb rested near it, ready and still. She waited for me to drop it. I didn't. I slid the bill closer. The paper rasped under my palm. The charm's cartoon wave stared up at me through the numbers. It was too bright for the debt. She pressed her knuckles into the counter, as if anchoring herself. "We have enough going on," she said, eyes somewhere over my shoulder. She didn't move toward the table. She didn't reach for the charm. The fridge hummed and clicked off. The house settled. Outside, a car door slammed and faded. Inside, the bright plastic waited like a dare. I placed the keychain on the unpaid bill and aligned the edges. Her mouth tightened a fraction, a line drawn and held. The red stamp framed the smile on the charm. It didn't belong here. She watched the charm without blinking. I let the edges sit flush and squared the stack beneath it. Her hand hovered, then closed on the back of a chair instead. The grin on the plastic didn't move. "Where's this from?" I said, and kept my voice level. She shifted her weight and pretended to read the red stamp. Her tongue touched a canine and disappeared. The chair leg creaked once. "I turned off autopay," I said, pushing the next notice forward with my knuckle. Her eyes flicked toward the thermostat and back. "Last week." The room stayed the same temperature. "Why?" She didn't raise it as a question. Her shoulders stayed low and tucked. I slid my phone face down beside the key. "You told me to stop snooping, I thought, so I stopped carrying your weight." I let silence do the work. Mail had a better memory than both of us. I pulled a smaller envelope from the pile and set it down under the charm. The logo in the corner matched the smiling face. "Delinquent," I read, and positioned the date where she could see it. "Auction Friday." Her fingers reached again. I laid one finger over the ring and kept it. A number was stamped into the steel, worn but clear. "B17, I said, as if I were reading a part off a shelf. She glanced at the window like the number could slip out through the glass. "I drove by Tuesday," I said, and watched for the flinch. It was small, a blink too long. "Your car was there at 9. I didn't get out. I didn't look inside. I'm done paying for light here while you pay for another lock." "It's not." She stopped it with a dry swallow. The fridge cycled back on and rattled the magnet. I took my finger off the key and let it spin once. "Open it," I said. "Here. Now." I picked up the phone and hovered over the office number stamped on the notice. She kept still when the line picked up. Tinny music, a bored voice, a request for the unit and name. I gave the number and set it to speaker. The rep asked for permission. I looked at her. She looked at the floor. "Gate is locked for non-payment," the rep said. "Auction is scheduled." "Leave it," I said, and ended the call. Her breath came out through her nose, long and thin. "There are things you don't understand," she said to the table. I watched her hand flatten the edge of a bill until the paper bent. "Explain," I said. The bend held. "I'll fix it." She didn't reach for a pen. I moved a checkbook an inch toward her and stopped. "From your account," I said. My direct deposit moved this morning. No more joint. The word hit the wood and stayed. She picked up the charm. It disappeared into her pocket with a soft click of nails on plastic. I stacked the red stamps into a neat pile and aligned the corners. Lights or locks, I said, and gathered the rest under my arm. The smile went with her, but the dates stayed. She leaned against the counter and stared at the tile. The fridge hummed like it had a job. My phone lit up once, then twice. The first alert said declined, Cedar Lane storage. The second repeated itself, like a cough in an empty room. The name sat there until the glass went black. She shifted her weight and reached for the faucet. The stream hit porcelain and kept running. Her voice came small, almost careful. Spam, she said, and closed the handle without looking at me. I set the stack down and slid the top notice out with my thumb. The logo matched the alert. The date matched the calendar magnet on the fridge. The corner of her jaw moved once. You opened my mail, she said, eyes on the stove. Her nails tapped the counter twice, then stopped. You told me to stop snooping, I said, and held the red stamp where she couldn't avoid it. So I stopped paying to see what survived. The paper made a dry sound between my fingers. Another buzz. Bloom Sweets, weekend hold failed. The charm in her pocket pressed the fabric and made a small shape I recognized. She reached for her phone and missed it by an inch. The screen went dark before her hand got there. She left her hand on the table anyway, flat and steady. I was going to tell you, she said, aiming the words at the salt shaker. The cap was loose enough to spill. You had months, I said, and flipped a second letter. Replacement key fee. New fob issued. The amounts lined up like steps. She pulled the pocket closed with 2 fingers. The seam popped and held. Her breathing stayed quiet, almost rehearsed. I tapped the storage number on the notice and put it on speaker. She didn't blink. The ring tripped, then a voice answered with a smile you could hear. Owner on Unit 312, I said. Card is off. Flag it and don't take cash at the desk. The room absorbed the words and stayed level. Can't do that without a note on file, the woman said. Paper shuffled on her end. We can add a manager lock today if. Add it, I said, and ended the call before she finished. The silence landed between us and stayed put. That's not yours, she said, switching to the soft tone she used with neighbors. The sink was clean enough to check a reflection. She didn't. It's on my name and my money, I said, and pushed the red stamps into a straight line again. You built it with both. The stamps squared without complaint. Her phone buzzed on the edge of the table. New message, cut notice, 7 p.m. Utilities were efficient when you taught them to be. She didn't reach this time. Lights or locks, I said, and took my keys from the bowl by the door. You choose which one learns first. The metal knocked once against ceramic. She straightened and lifted her chin half an inch. We can fix this, she said like a test phrase. Her feet stayed under the same tile. You had your fix, I said, and glanced at the clock over the sink. The second hand ticked past her eyes. I'll be at the unit at 6. The time cut the room in half. I took the jacket from the chair and left the cup on the counter. Her hands stayed flat, palms pressed on the grout. The door took the pull without a sound. The streets were open and dull. I kept the needle on the limit and watched the numbers roll. 6 kept walking toward me in white paint. The facility lights sat in a row like a checklist. The clerk looked up, then down at the log. I wrote the unit number with a steady hand. The corrugated door came up slow, a belly of metal coughing once. Fluorescent stuttered on. Dust held a map that only shoes could read. Boxes in neat stacks. Dates in her handwriting. A plastic tote labeled house. A locked fire safe in the back like a thought she didn't want. I slid the tote forward with my foot and pulled the lid. Red banners on white envelopes. Forwarding stickers to a P.O. box I hadn't seen in our address book. Disconnection notices. Duplicate statements. Autopay transfer forms signed with her tight loops. The pile had weight because debt does. Her steps stopped at the threshold before her face showed. She took in the spread, then fixed her gaze on the far wall. We can talk at home, she said into the concrete. I turned an envelope so the date faced her. My knuckle tapped the P.O. box number. The echo made the manager cough down the hall. You changed the routing, I said, keeping my voice low. Her mouth closed on a word that didn't finish. My finger rested on the line with her name. She stepped in and took one bill by the corner, as if it might stain. You stopped paying, she said, eyes on the font size. The paper trembled, not her hand. I stopped paying when you moved them off the table, I said, and slid out the forwarded stack. The top notice still had the factory fold. On the workbench I set 2 addressed envelopes side by side. One to our bank's security desk. One to her HR. Stamps already pressed flat. Pick one, I said, and stepped back so she saw my shoes and the line they drew. Her jaw flexed but didn't open. She tried a soft shrug that wasn't soft. It's not what you think, she said, head tilted a degree toward the safe. She didn't touch it. I tapped the safe with the back of my hand. The metal sounded full. The dial had a new sheen. The code had lived in a different house. Under another lid, I found a second wallet, spare keys, 2 SIM cards and paper sleeves. Receipts with cash withdrawals and a regular slope. Side life arranged by hour. She reached for the SIMs, then stopped short and folded her fingers. Those are old, she said, but the date stamps printed the month we argued about overtime. I stacked the bills back into one column and pressed them flat. The unit held our echoes in place. The clock on my phone gave me 6:10. You think I'm the problem, she said, eyes finally on mine. Her voice had no throw. It was a room with closed vents. I think you rehearsed this, I said, and slid the HR letter closer by an inch. Ink faced up like a switch. Her breath hitched once and then returned to even. She looked at both envelopes and chose to look at neither. Choice hung for a second and didn't land. I closed the door halfway and left the lock hanging open. 9, I said, checking the corridor for movement. At 9, both go. She nodded once, which meant nothing. Her eyes tracked the safe again as if it could speak for her. The metal stayed quiet. I set the envelopes flat on the desk, edges aligned with the grain. Postmarks inked, addresses clean. The clock on the wall sat at 8:41 and didn't blink. Her shoes stayed pointed at the safe. I moved them to the chair by the door, within reach of the gap. The latch held the door from catching, a mouth half open. She stood as if a shift might trigger an alarm. The room held its breath. The safe keypad showed oil on 4 numbers. 1479. I tilted the faceplate until the smears lit. I watched her hands while I pressed. One red chirp and a brief throat flex. The second try turned the light green. The door fell open like it wanted to be helpful. Inside sat a spare phone, 2 passports, a key fob, a lease under her maiden name, a storage unit receipt, and a bank slip with my routing on it. I took the lease and the slip. The metal lip touched my knuckles and stayed cold. She reached for the passports, then stopped half an inch shy. I held up the bank slip and tapped the line where the transfers hid under. Utilities. Her eyes left the numbers and didn't return. You ran it through the water bill, I said, setting the slip on the bedspread. I closed that valve. She crossed to the bathroom, turned the faucet, watched water for 1 second, then shut it off without touching it. I needed a place to breathe, she said, not looking past the doorway. The mirror did the staring for her. The corridor dragged a housekeeping cart past our door, wheels with one bad bearing. I raised the envelopes and checked the stamps with my thumb. A light on the smoke detector blinked slow, counting for both of us. 9 was already standing in the hall. The spare phone woke at a touch. A thread sat pinned at the top with a location and a time. One message read, "Are we on?" I flattened my palm on the screen until it went black. She watched my hand, not the glass. She slid the lease toward me by one finger. "It's a sublet for 3 months," she said to the carpet. "Key fobs for the garage on 3rd. Her voice didn't move higher. Numbers beat promises. At 9 o'clock the latch tapped as a knuckle hit the door twice. I stepped to the gap and held the chair with my knee. A hand with a black glove appeared in the slice of light. I put both envelopes into it without turning. The hand disappeared and the hall swallowed the paper. We stood with the safe open like a mouth missing words. I put the key fob in my pocket and left the passports where they were. "Unit number," I said, looking at the receipt. "We go now." The second hand clicked hard once and kept walking. I shut the safe and let the steel take the sound. She watched the floor and fixed the strap on her bag. I slid the receipt behind my license and killed the light. We stepped into the hall and left the deadbolt at one turn. We went to the car. The engine caught on the first try. She sat close to the door and kept her hands in her lap. I checked the mirror until the tailing light went empty. The city moved like a belt and stayed impersonal. The storage place sat under a line of billboards and humming wire. I held the receipt under the keypad light and typed clean. The buzzer blew short and the metal gate crawled aside. The gap was enough. We rolled past rows of blue doors and concrete seams. Numbers climbed, then broke, then corrected. She walked half a step behind and read nothing. The unit marked itself by being exactly where it should be. The lock was a round puck. I brushed the fob along the sensor and waited. A green blink and a dull click. The door rode up with a corrugated rattle and stale air came out like old tape. Boxes stood in easy stacks. 2 suitcases. A folding chair, a rolled mat, a metal drawer unit. A row of plastic bins with masking tape labels and square handwriting. Someone had laid it out with time. I cut one tape line with my thumbnail. Receipts and rubber bands. Health insurance cards. Duplicate chargers. A zip bag of keys on tags that said things like North Door and Mail. Every bundle had a date. Another box held bills with our names and a second address I had never opened a door at. Fees, storage renewals, ride totals, groceries bought 30 blocks from home. The charge lines walked in pairs. The cover ran on autopay. She touched a sweater that matched one missing from the closet and didn't put it on. You stopped paying, she said, voice neat, like a file closing. I stacked the papers by month and watched the edges line up. Not paying makes things knock. A manila folder sat under a towel. Inside, a lease rider, a bank form, a letter from a credit union. My name in block letters, our street crossed out, a signature printed smooth that wasn't mine. My name moved where my hand never went. Footsteps slid along the concrete. A cartwheel vibrated the metal. I dropped the door to a hand's width and stood still. A couple went by talking about paint. They didn't look in. I took photos. Each page, each tag, the fob against the lock, the number on the door. She leaned on the wall and stared at the floor drain. It was temporary, she said, and the word sat like a date stamp. Temporary had a lease and a drawer full of mail. I closed the door and heard the latch seat. The fob chirped once and went quiet. Outside the air was clean and thin like a hallway at night. I turned the receipt over. A second unit number was written small in the corner. I keyed back in and walked the long row. The second number sat 3 doors from the exit. New disc lock. Fresh scrape on the slab like a turn taken fast. I crouched. A corner of an envelope winked under the seal. I slid it out with the receipt and read the sender. Virtual mailbox on 3rd. Her name, no home address. I folded it twice and kept moving. The office was dark. Motion woke a wall of cameras. A frame showed this row with a timestamp in the lower right. 9 minutes dead. I pressed my palm to the glass until the screen went black again. The building knew who fed it. In the car I opened the bank app. 2 charges to the same vendor, one with our old unit noted, one with the small number from the receipt. Start dates 3 months apart. I marked them and watched the font turn gray. The ledger held still for once. Home was quiet. She sat at the table with her phone under her hands. She lifted her eyes to the envelope and then away. I set it down between us and opened the laptop. Mortgage. Power. Gas. I took them off autopay in a straight line. The cursor reached the edge. Her phone chimed. She froze with 2 fingers on the flap. Something's wrong with the accounts, she said without looking. I closed the lid until it clicked. You told me to stop, I said, and put the fobs on the wood, side by side. She breathed and let it out slow. The envelope turned under her hand and stopped. We can fix this, she said, voice level. I took the receipt out and pointed at the small number. Her eyes landed, slid to the sink, and stayed there. The faucet dripped once and kept quiet. I tore the envelope. The invoice inside listed the second unit and last week's cash. Due again Friday. I set the paper where her hand had been. She touched the edge and pulled her fingers back like it burned. The date stared up. Keys, I said, palm open. She unzipped her tote and tipped it. Receipts, a hair tie, a spare charger, a second plastic fob with the storage logo stamped shallow. I took it and set it by mine. That made a match set. We go, I said, standing. Her chair scraped a short inch. She pressed her ring flat to the table and looked at the oven clock. Now? She asked, soft. I nodded once. The clock ticked a second longer than it should. I killed the kitchen light. She fell in behind me without touching my back. Her phone screen lit and died in her palm like a fish. The stairwell amplified our steps into one sound. We drove without the radio. Her window was up, hands knotted low in her lap. The lot had 6 cars and a cigarette burning down on the curb. I held the gate for her fob and watched the light change. Green is a permission. The second row smelled like cleaner. The disc lock on the door had a new nick in the edge, bright metal showing. The envelope seam I'd broken was clean. She stood one step back from the lock and didn't reach. I put the fob in her palm and waited. Her fingers closed around it, and opened again. She swallowed once and found the key on the ring without looking down. The hall camera blinked twice and steadied. "Open it," I said, and kept my hands empty. She slid the key in and paused on the detent. A small turn. The latch scraped over fresh metal and let go. The door drifted on its hinge without sound. Warm air slid out. No compressor hum. She palmed the wall plate and clicked twice. The ceiling stayed black and flat. I didn't step past the threshold. Her shoulders moved once. She clicked a different switch and stared at her hand. The hall camera fixed its red eye on us. "Power's cut," I said, and watched her thumb pull back off the plastic. The silence pressed on the glassware and the blank TV. She went to the counter and reached for a stack half tucked under a dish towel. Her wrist stilled when she saw the red bands. She pulled the towel over them and left a corner exposed. I lifted the towel with 2 fingers and read the headers. Final notice. Piaritas Connect. Delinquent. The white one in the middle had a heat-sealed edge that wasn't factory. She drew it back quick, as if I'd opened a cabinet I didn't pay for. She set it under the cutting board and turned the board square to the edge. The seam faced the wall. I tapped the corner of another envelope and slid it out. Storage unit. Different address. Her maiden name in black, neat print. The building logo matched the key tag in my pocket. She opened the fridge out of habit, and closed it again fast. The bulb was dead and the cold gone. Condensation beaded and ran. I left it ajar and watched water drip off the bottom shelf. The bedroom door was half open. The carpet had a paler rectangle near the dresser. Tape grit marked the outline of a box that wasn't there. The baseboard had a fresh scuff at knee height. "Someone drilled the latch last week," I said, looking at the nick on the jamb. The shavings were still fine in the carpet pile. She stood in the doorway with her phone lit up, thumb moving then still. She locked the screen without sending anything. Her other hand flattened on the frame. "You stopped paying," she said, not quite asking. Her voice missed the floor by half an inch. I set a folded printout on the dresser. Bank report. Autopay terminations. The first call log underneath it. Unknown number. 2 minutes. Unit manager. Wrong name. "He didn't call about lights," I said, and nudged the paper to square it with the edge. "He called about a lock he was holding." She sat on the bed without bending the comforter. Heels off the rug. Eyes on the space where the box had been. The phone face down on her thigh. "You told me to stop snooping," I said, and kept my hands clear of her line of sight. So I stopped feeding it. I took the plastic tag out of my pocket and set it next to her phone. Blue oval. 314 in black, embossed. The metal key was smooth and warm. She looked at the oval without moving her hand. Thumb pressed flat on the dark screen. No blink. No reach. I turned her phone over with 2 fingers. The lock screen didn't come up. No bars. No carrier. A blank that ate its own light. "They called me at 11, I said, and watched her watch the key. "Card on file is off. Noon they rekey." The tag clicked once on the wood. She shifted her heel back under the chair. The chair legs didn't groan. "Where did you get it?" she asked, eyes staying low. The question was small and direct. "Desk had a spare." I angled the tag so the numbers faced her. "I used mine last month. I turned it off yesterday." Her thumb found the side button. The phone stayed dead. She did it again, slower, like a ritual that had worked before. "I stopped paying for the room," I said, and let the edge harden the syllables. "Phone. Cards. All the doors that stay open when you don't look at them." I kept my voice level. She finally looked up, not fully, just enough to find my mouth. "You had no right," she said, and placed the phone back on her thigh like it was hot. "I have no obligation to underwrite it." I let the word sit. "Noon." I glanced at the hallway, at the light under the door. Time is geometry. Her jaw made a quick notch I hadn't seen before. "What's inside?" she said, and the question leaned against the room like a hand on glass. "Window cracked. Air stale. 2 cups in the sink." I didn't add the towel folded too carefully. I kept it spare. "I didn't touch your things." I put a bank envelope on the dresser and let it stay closed. Front desk receipts. Room folio. Her name sliced in all caps. She pulled her heels closer with a toe. "You're punishing me," she said, quiet, as if testing the shape of the words. She went for the old attempted to shift blame and let it hang. "I didn't give it a hook." "Get up," I said, and opened the top drawer to show it empty. "You can close it yourself, or it gets closed over you." I didn't raise my voice. She stood without using her hands. Bag strap slid up her shoulder. I looked at the bag, then at the door, and left the look there. "Leave it," I said, and stepped aside. The bag came off her shoulder and dropped clean on the rug. We walked through the kitchen like strangers passing in a hallway. The dishwasher light was solid blue. The counters were too clear. I locked the deadbolt behind us twice and checked it once. She didn't turn around. She didn't ask for the key. The car was still warm. She folded her hands on her knees and kept them there. The key tag lay between us, numbers up. Traffic worked. We didn't. The hotel came up, brick that had been cleaned too often. Third floor stank of hallway deodorizer and carpet glue. Room numbers in metal ovals. 310, 312, 314. I set the tag in her palm. Warm met warm. "Your door," I said, and leaned back from it. The lock waited. She slid the plastic in, slow, eyes on the diode. The green blinked once and held. The door gave. Air hit us first. Conditioner and citrus. Lamp already on. Bed made like someone who paid to leave it. I didn't cross the carpet. She stood in the doorway until the hinge pushed back on her hand. Then she went in and kept the door open. It sounded polite. The envelope sat on the desk where I'd left it. Her name in my hand so she couldn't call it a clerk's mistake. She looked at it, and then at me, and then took it like it might stain. She thumbed through the stack. Power. Water. Card. Each corner stamped red. Her thumb stopped on the dates. I picked one out and set it beside the folded folio from the nightstand. Dates matched the room charges without effort. The numbers did the talking. "You went through my phone?" she asked, still reading, even as her hand shook once and stilled. "No," I said, and put my finger on a line item. Numbers told me more than her screen. The closet door was ajar. I tapped it with a knuckle. 2 hangers turned. One had her gray. One held a jacket that wasn't mine. The hanger had 2 shoulders. She didn't touch the jacket. She looked past it like it blurred. "It's not what you think," she said, voice leveled to the hotel's hum. The words came out before her mouth decided. I put the folio back and closed it. "You told me to stop snooping," I said, and watched her jaw set. I stopped funding the cover instead. She let the envelope fall to the desk. The stack slid in a neat fan. The red stamps brightened against the glass. The dates lined up clean. I stepped to the bathroom and pushed it open with 2 fingers. 2 toothbrushes in a glass. 1 travel cologne, heavy base. Razor with a wet edge. The mirror still held spots. She was behind me, not close. "What do you want?" she said, space kept between each word. She didn't reach for my sleeve. I put my keys on the counter and left them there. "Clarity," I said, and watched the second brush drip. The ask had been small. She looked at the bed, not the desk. She chose furniture over arithmetic. "You stopped paying to hurt me," she said, as if naming pain might make it change shape. She attempted to shift blame without moving her feet. I picked up the envelope and slid a card out. Cut in half, clean scissor edge. I set both pieces beside the hotel folio. The account would not absorb this room again. "You made your choice," I said, and turned back to the door. My voice kept the same temperature. Cause had found its own legs. She looked like she wanted to ask for time. She didn't ask. The room clock blinked 12 o'clock against the wall like a dare. I stepped over the threshold and pulled the door to. Her hand didn't come up to stop it. She let the soft close do the work. The lock kissed the strike and clicked. Metal layered the sound thin. On the other side, air kept moving the same. I walked the hall to the stairs, carpet pressing up in squares. The deodorizer hung on the bend like a curtain. Nothing marked my passing. At the landing I took out my phone and scrolled to the bank. 1 press. 1 confirmation. The line picked up without music. "Leasing or accounting?" I kept my voice flat and watched the stairwell breathe. "Office," she said, paper moving near her mic. A chair creaked. The smell of citrus hung in the bend. "Unit 2B. Autopay pulled from First Mercantile ending A2. Reference ran under Maple Ridge Services." I read the numbers off my screen and let the silence push. We don't confirm occupant details, she said softer now. Keys started talking. You don't have to, I said, thumb on the transfer I'd reversed. I'm calling to let you know the pull was revoked. Notices go to the occupant. Her inhale clipped the line. Sir, who are you in relation to? The payer who stopped, I said, and ended it on the click. I moved the balance out in 2 swipes. Joint to personal. Color changed from blue to gray. I killed her card on the account and watched it dim. The app asked if I was sure. I pressed it twice. Utilities were next. Gas. Electric. Both on paper now, both redirected. The agent tried to sell me green energy. I let the pitch die and confirmed the meter numbers. The hold music never came. On the mortgage, I toggled off the auto pull and set manual. The calendar blinked clean. The house would stay. The extras would not. Outside, the air held the same temperature as the stairwell. A truck backed into a spot and raised a wave of gravel. I walked past it with the phone warm in my palm. At home, I keyed in the code and let the door refuse her old digits. The lock rolled and set. I put my wallet on the counter and aligned the edges out of habit. The kitchen lights hummed low. She came in quiet, a paper bag at her hip, eyes going to the keypad first. Her thumb hovered and then dropped to her side. She shut the door with a soft heel. Her shoes stayed on. You changed it, she said, staying by the mat. Her hair was tucked neat, like she'd been somewhere official. Too many hands, I said, and set my phone face up between us. The transaction stared back with names she knew. She didn't reach for the screen. Her hand brushed the bag, then pressed it flat. Something in it clinked against glass. You said stop snooping, I said, not moving toward her. The sink dripped once and then remembered how to be still. I did, she said, and folded the bag closed with small, precise fingers. Her eyes stayed on the fold. My part's done, I said, and slid the phone closer. The last transfer sat pending with a red badge on it. The vendor name was the same as the hallway. Her phone lit on the counter where she'd left it earlier. Unknown number first. Then the name. The complex didn't hide itself. She watched it vibrate without touching it. The second call came faster, the same letters in brighter white. The screen trembled against granite. They'll want occupant confirmation, I said, seating myself and letting the chair scrape the tile. The scrape sounded like a line drawn. Please don't do this here, she whispered, mouth barely moving. She folded the bag again tighter, as if paper could hold water. You wanted me blind, I said, and opened the drawer with the bills. It held an empty slot where the checkbook had sat. I left it open. The third call flipped to text. The preview bloomed with a due date and a number for payments. She finally reached and turned the phone over like a photo she didn't want to see. Minutes matter when someone else holds the key, I said, and let the room hear the clock. She watched the drawer like it might refill itself. I let the gap stare back at her. The clock clipped the air into hard inches. I spread the stop payment slips beside her elbow. Paper did the talking. Her shoulders moved once, like a winch she hid late. She slid the phone under a magazine and squared the stack until the corner cut straight. The third number tried again and then went quiet. Silence worked faster than excuses. Headlights rolled across the ceiling in a slow sweep. A diesel rumble took the street like a hand on a throat. She glanced at the garage door and then at me, small and quick. The blinds shook when the truck braked. You're not, she started, the words dry and short. Doing this. She kept her hand on the table and didn't lift it. I nodded at the empty slot and then at the clock. Time finished her sentence. I opened the door to the garage and let the smell of rubber and cold cement slip in. The hood of the SUV caught the strobe, dull and honest. A fist rapped twice on the side door, professional and bored. I didn't make her answer it. The driver held a tablet and chewed his lip like a metronome. Got release or keys, he said, eyes already past me. I set the spare fob in his palm and signed where he tapped. He didn't look at her face. She stood by the washer and traced a chipped spot in the enamel with her nail. The shutter of the tow ratchet clicked, even, hungry. The lifted tires cleared the threshold like a slow shrug. Metal doesn't argue. I stopped paying for what wasn't mine, I said, and turned the papers toward her. The title lender letter lay on top, corners hard, logo loud. She kept her eyes on the chipped enamel and breathed like she might disturb it. Stillness counts as an answer. I laid another envelope out, return address from the bank. The authorized transfers reversed. Joint cards closed. Autopay off. I kept my voice where it belonged. Utilities move Friday, I said, and slid the form with her name already typed. They'll call you. She placed 2 fingers on the edge and didn't pull. Contact is a kind of signature. The truck eased away, winch whining down the block. The garage took its old shape back, emptier, honest. Her phone buzzed once under the magazine and quit. The house learned its new size. She reached into her sweater and pushed something deeper into the pocket. The square outline flashed and vanished. The missing checkbook had a place to hide. I didn't reach for it. "You'll what?" she said, voice flat, eyes on the floor. I picked up my bag from the chair and tucked the folder under my arm. The keys hit my palm with clean weight. Lines get drawn with small noises. "I'll pay my bills," I said, and stepped past the open drawer. I let the door swing without a bang. The clock took the room back. Minutes hold their own key.